whether it be rafting down a river, fishing to our heart's content, or exploring the great outdoors. We decided that morning to forego our university courses and drive 2 hours away from our house to a river. We wanted to spend the day rafting, enjoying the adrenaline rush that comes from being in nature. The rapids were quite high. With my experience rafting on other rivers and my natural talent as a swimmer, I possessed an inflated sense of self-confidence, a trait common among adolescents. I failed to ensure that the life jacket was fastened. While demonstrating to our London acquaintance one of the liberties enjoyed by children from small towns, we were having a blast. We started to gain speed as we swam with the flow of the river. A pedestrian bridge spanned the river ahead. An elderly man was making frantic signals for us to turn left. His anger was evident, yet we were unable to hear a word he yelled. It was our assumption that he was in danger and might need our assistance, so we made an effort to guide the raft towards the left coast. Despite our best efforts, the river resisted our attempts to reach the shore. The raft instead crumpled after swerving into the midspan shoulder. The cold spring current swept us away. I dove headfirst into a vortex on the left side of the raft, unaware that my friends had gone right until much later. I was pulled underwater by the whirlpool. Which way was up? I had no idea. I was trying to escape while swimming rapidly, out of breath, panicked, and incredibly cold. Swimming up or down was completely confusing to me. Some idea or voice popped into my brain. It seemed to be saying, "Let go, go with the flow, let go." I ceased swimming without more ado. The act of giving in to a power bigger than myself was liberating. There was an underlying sense of trust, a conviction that everything will work out perfectly. A total eclipse occurred. Like a movie composed of images and video clips, my life started to unfold before my eyes. There was silence as they went. Beginning at infancy and continuing up to the present day, they unfolded in a linear fashion. A few of the flashbacks stick out in my mind. One involved my first bee sting as a toddler, which I believed was a fly on the front porch door screen. Another involved my throwing a tantrum on the dining room floor when my mom wanted to go grocery shopping, as seen from a point hovering near the ceiling. Lastly, I received a lady's electric shaver as a birthday present from my dad, as seen from a point hovering over the dining room table. It was like putting on a pair of virtual reality goggles. The pictures seemed to be flashing before my eyes, as if they were dancing over my retinas. Everything that was happening before my eyes happened in an instant. It was probably only a few seconds at most. In retrospect, I should have asked my mom about those early memories that weren't a part of my present recollection. At around 3 years old, I'd whacked a bee and had a massive tantrum in front of my mom's antique treadle sewing machine in the dining room, which was in our room when I first started school. She couldn't recall a few of the other memories I brought up. At that point, there was pitch blackness. I swiveled around and saw much deeper darkness. I deliberately checked to make sure my eyes were open, because I assumed they were closed. As soon as I listened to the voice within my head that whispered, "Turn around," a tiny flash of light appeared. I distinctly recall thinking, "I'm in a cave," and then the serene, unwavering idea prompted me to seek for the illumination. I felt encouraged to face my fears head-on. Floating soundlessly through space, it was gentle, leisurely, serene. I just lay there in the dark, staring about. I don't remember trying to move my body in any way. People would sometimes cross my path. An elderly man was accompanied by a burro as he strolled along. My grandpa, who was my dad's dad and had passed away a number of years ago, was there. Additional individuals were visible to me, moving slowly or hardly perceptible in both directions. The closer I got to the cave's mouth, the brighter the light at the opening became. Unlike natural daylight, which frequently has a tint to it, it was exceedingly brilliant. Specifically, this light was completely white. I felt an overwhelming sense of tranquility the moment I stepped into the light. Back at my place, the atmosphere was one of unconditional love and acceptance. This love and harmony enveloped me completely. Experiencing this emotion again was most closely resembled when my 2 children were born. My mind had an idea. How had I gotten here so quickly? It inquired. My look caught the thinking off guard. I felt uncertain and anxious. Where am I? I thought to myself as I started to feel increasingly disoriented. Am I in the right place? my internal monologue detected my unease and, almost mind-reading, started assuring me that everything was okay, that I was in a secure place, and then redirected me to the sentiments of love and tranquility I had experienced before. Though I was relaxed, I couldn't help but wonder, can you really read my mind? I felt like the idea had finally come to terms with the fact that in order to be totally at ease, I needed a more tangible means of communication. Therefore, the question sprang in my mind, what shape or form would you find most comfortable? Could you please explain? I remembered that some of them call for me to assume the form of an elderly wise man, while others call for a lady, and yet others an animal, of all shapes, sizes, ages, and species. What about you? Without any hesitation, my thought was human. At the same time, the light started to solidify into a more solid shape while also splitting into breathtaking rays of color. I finally said, "That is enough," when the light had progressed to the point where it resembled a human form, albeit a rather cookie-cutter one, like a gingerbread man. With this form, I feel at ease. The form was not only three-dimensional, but it could also move. All of its parts emitted luminous beams, and it was made of light alone. Many years later, when I first laid eyes on iridescent material, I went back to that color. It brought back even stronger emotions of safety, love, and tranquility. Thoughts remained the medium of our communication. This entity wanted to know if I required a child, male or female voice. An intriguing decision to consider is the fact that I went with a man's. I don't remember anyone ever telling me which language to speak at this stage of my life. The name of this light form is something I'm curious about. As I perused it, I started to learn a few of the many names that different civilizations give to God. I interjected, saying that God had a positive impact on my life despite my atheism at the time. Whatever it was, I knew the light was energy in its purest form. I was aware that many of the individuals I knew would refer to it as God, but I never used that term myself. We started chatting. Where was I? Home. A familiar place, somewhere I had been many times before. What was I doing here? The light desired to understand. Like you, I was curious. They said I was ahead of schedule. I needed to get more done. Which tasks are needed? It would make sense to me. I ought to return. It was against my will. I wished I could have stayed. That broke my heart. I knew it was my responsibility, and if I wasn't up to the task, they wouldn't have asked me. Though I knew I had to return, the prospect filled me with dread. Thanks to the light, I was able to find my way to safety. I was reassured by my guide, yet I was still hesitant to depart. Even when I was a college student, I would dream about going rafting again. In my dreams, my rafting guide took the form of my grandfather, my mother's father, who had passed away a little over a year prior to our rafting adventure. Before I was prepared to depart, I paused to soak up the enveloping love, tranquility, and sunshine. I dashed back into the cave's shadow. That was lightning fast. Throughout my journey through the night, I don't remember coming across any other souls. Returning to my physical form and emerging from the shadows, I surfaced in the turbulent river the very next second, finally able to breathe air instead of water. What transpired to me could have been completed in the blink of an eye. After escaping the maelstrom, I found myself swept downstream over a succession of rapids. I was prepared to battle for my life after understanding that I would surely hit my head on a boulder and die unless I swung around so that my legs were downstream. I began to shift my body such that my legs were directly ahead of me. The data I used was derived from something I had heard about motorcycle helmets on a radio or television show. The message was, you can live with broken legs, but not with a smashed brain. In a time of crisis, your thoughts can be quite amusing. I was now adrift in the rapids like a log, and my arms were still not working properly to rescue me. My mind was made up. I had to get down on all fours. I reasoned that I could get closer to the riverbank or use my hands to grip onto something, even though it would be tougher to lift my head to receive air. I remained in that position for some time, attempting to cling to rocks while swimming breaststroke to raise my head above the water and breathe. My method finally worked after what seemed like an endless amount of trials and errors. I clung to a tiny pebble that I could wrap my arms around, and I ducked my head to keep from being swallowed by the swift water. My torso and legs were too tired to stand, so I lay down for a while. The water I breathed in made my lungs hurt. There were areas of water as shallow as 8 inches and others as deep as a foot. I mustered the courage to stand up and awkwardly stumbled my way to the side. The water was so high that I was flung onto the flooded right bank. There was around a foot of water, and I clung to the little trees and bushes for dear life. Not only was the river flooded, it was overflowing. It was at that moment when the idea of my pals first crossed my mind. Did they make it? What if they were somewhere else? At the start of this journey, the first signs of spring were beautiful to behold, but as soon as I felt secure enough to begin considering the needs of others, the world took on a whole new palette. The inner light that I had beheld when ensnared in that vortex shone through the trees, the river, the sky, and the leaves. The greens, blues, and browns were all more verdant, bluer and browner, respectively. Even inanimate things like rocks, water, and the sky seemed to have a life of their own. Their very being was exuding vitality. Even though I felt this way for weeks thereafter, it was never quite how it was right then. Thanks to the little trees and plants, I was able to walk upstream. With the river rushing at my feet, I clung to their branches and trunks for support. Seeking any sign of my companion's whereabouts, I combed the beach and underbrush. Hoping not to come across any corpses, I prayed. The rapids' rumble intensified. At last I could discern the footbridge. My 2 companions were clinging to the raft on the left, precisely where the elderly man atop the bridge had frantically warned us not to go. Upon spotting me, they began to yell, leap, and embrace one another. A little dam lay behind them. If our raft had flown in that direction by itself, it would have been a 6-meter plunge into a tranquil pool. He was trying to get us to stay on the river's more slow, natural flow rather than the steep drop-off, and we were doing everything we could to stop and aid him. The bottom of the raft was torn. We retrieved our belongings by sitting on the raft walls, dangling our feet, after exchanging numerous hugs. We retrieved the footwear, life vest, and paddles. With the exception of a few small things, Hi, I'm Alex. I had an extraordinary encounter when I was 25 years old. Now I'm 57 years old. I pray that you will never have to go through what I did, no matter how bad it seems. It was a watershed moment in my spiritual path and the course of my life. My friends and I have always aspired to live the adventurous lives we see portrayed in movies, fishing to our heart's content, or exploring the great outdoors. We decided that morning to forego our university courses and drive 2 hours away from our house to a river, rafting, enjoying the adrenaline rush that comes from being in nature. The rapids were quite high. With my experience rafting on other rivers and my natural talent as a swimmer, I possessed an inflated sense of self-confidence, a trait common among adolescents. I failed to ensure that the life jacket was fastened. While demonstrating to our London acquaintance one of the liberties enjoyed by children